I think that time it was working. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Cashmere from noise11.com. We're a daily music news and video site, a channel that services out to companies such as AAP and iHeartRadio via the Australian Radio Network. And we have the panel this afternoon about the landscape of the record label. So it's going to be a very fascinating panel to share their information for you. A very diverse set of characters we have up here on stage. And I would like to introduce Frank Catella, the Stereosonic man, now the One Love man.
I was always One Love first, and then Stereo came later.
Yeah. Frank will be handing out Ferraris to the best question later on this afternoon.
Yeah.
We hope. Ftmaus from Mistletoe is a very interesting label because Mistletoe started as, look, you know, I had it described as a mum and pop type operation to start with. But I guess, you know, in a way, it's a great story that we're going to hear from Sophie about, you know, her and her husband, how they started a wonderful boutique record label that then blossomed into some amazing projects, over 60 releases, major tours around Australia, all starting off 10 years ago with Ariel Pink, and we'll find out how it all evolved from there to where it is today, and see what the story is with that. Next to Sophie, Timothy Janes from Caroline. Caroline is part of the Universal Music Group, but a very interesting component of the Universal Music Group. Universal is obviously one of the three major record labels and quite a machine, but not all artists require all parts of the machine to operate and release and get the message out to the fan base. Timothy is involved with Caroline, and we'll talk about the various artists and what they look for when they're bringing artists in and releases, such as things like Marilyn Manson, The Prodigy, even Smashing Pumpkins' latest album came through the Caroline branch of Universal instead of going through the major part of the machine. So we'll find out more about that. And this lovely lady at the end, Marty Court, one of my very first work experience girls. Yeah, still here today doing work experience with me today, Marty. It's good to see that 20 years ago when I was working at Austereo and Marty came in and, you know, we didn't scare her away. Not only didn't we scare her away, but she's grown all the way to becoming one of the heads of Warner Music. She's the General Manager of Warner Music Australia, based in Sydney. And Warner Music, again, one of the big three. God, you know, I remember when I first started, I think there was the big eight. Yeah. When we talk about the changing landscape of the music industry, we do have quite a bit to talk about. Warner Music has a very rich catalogue of Australian artists. The Pierce Brothers is just an example of, you know, one of the great Melbourne-based artists that has been doing well here through the label in recent weeks. Conrad Sewell's another one of your artists. An Australian-based act who is doing marvellous things in the United States and continually coming back to Australia and doing big things on the Australian chart here. And of course at the other end of the scale, artists like Ed Sheeran, who is probably going to deliver the biggest selling album of the year, I'm guessing probably at this point. Him or Taylor Swift, it's going to be... Yeah, we've both got the tours coming up, so exactly. Marty will be very busy out the front of the Ed Sheeran concerts with a little merch stand just to make sure she sticks it to Sony before the end of the year. So we're going to be talking a bit about all of that over the course of the next hour or so, and of course we'll open up the forum here for you to ask any questions that you would like to ask along the way. I'll start with you, Sophie, because Mistletoe is a great example of a couple of people who had an idea and acted on that idea and turned it into a developing business. I'm guessing there's two levels of people out in the audience today. We probably have some people who are artists or want to be artists and would be looking to one of their first signings and how they get signed to a company like Mistletoe, but there's probably a few entrepreneurs out there that would also like to do what Sophie has been doing, and she might be able to give us a bit of a roadmap as to how it all started. So was it a wacky, crazy idea? How did the original Mistletoe come to be?
Well, yeah, the roadmap has been an unusual one. I'm not sure if it's one that other people could follow, because it seems like it has been something that has been just so unique to me and to Ash, my partner in Mistletoe, who then became my husband. And it's a mom and pop shop. We're two people running the organisation, and we hire people in as we need them. And we work from home still, which is a great blessing. To me, I guess my definition of success is being able to work in my pyjamas with my cat on my lap. That's... Yeah. I've made it on my terms,
You know when they call you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're all going to have a mental picture now as to...
Exactly.
We're going to start wearing pyjamas.
But,
you're in an office, Frank. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing.
But, next year we're celebrating our 10th year as Mistletoe, which is just mind-blowing for me. When we started out, my background, I had started as a record collector, as an obsessive teenager, and that got me into community radio. I started doing the midnight to dawn graveyard shift on 3CR when I was a teenager, and then went to PBS, got a regular show on PBS, and did programs there for, weekly programs for 15 years. And radio is still my first love. I do fill in programs on Triple R quite a bit, and that's something that I adore doing. When I was at PBS, I started serving on the board and getting involved as a volunteer, organising shows. And that's how I started to learn how things work, and that I could have a role, beyond just being a fangirl, that I could actually be behind the scenes helping to make things happen. And it was incredibly exciting to me as a young woman, just getting involved in, organising benefit gigs, just putting magazines together, whatever I could do as a volunteer to get involved on the scene with the radio station and also with the bands that I loved. And I started writing about music quite a lot, and I wrote a lot for Street Press, for Beat, back in the day, and for zines, for my friends' zines and my own zines. And so after that, I had a lucky break and started working as a freelance music journalist. I started writing for The Age, and I wrote, this was back in the days when newspapers would employ freelancers and pay them handsomely. I know those days are gone right now, but I made a living for well over 5 years, just full-time writing for The Age in my pyjamas. I've spent most of my working life in my pyjamas, actually. And then I got interested in other aspects of music by becoming a band manager, which was, I really started out as a fanager, just fell in love with the band, and they asked me to manage them, and I was like, yeah, I'm up for that. And that it's something I probably will never do again, but it did make me learn about every single aspect of the music business and how it worked.
So you had quite a track record before Mistletoe first started then.
Yeah, sorry,
but
it took
Mistletoe
so long
started on one artist, didn't it?
It did.
And that artist was Ariel Pink.
It was, and at this stage I had met my partner Ash, and his background was also in music. He'd been a record store guy all his life. We had both always dreamed about running a record label. I remember asking Richard Moffat, who at the time was running, way over there as a record label, for his advice I said, look, I'd like to start a label one day. And he said, well, if you start a label, basically it's like bleeding to death really slowly over 10 years. And it's barely perceptible because you keep getting infusion, you'll get a little infusion, and then it'll just start. It says, don't do it, Sophie, just... But so with that in mind, that put me off for a few years. But Ash and I started Mistletoe. This was in the MySpace era 10 years ago, and
Hands up who remembers MySpace. Oh, look, 3 people.
I am so super nostalgic for MySpace. It was an amazing time. The internet, it was a moment in time when the internet seemed to be a space that was going to be free, and it was going to empower independent music in ways that perhaps it hasn't turned out how we thought it would at that time. But, in that MySpace era, Ash and I loved Ariel Pink. We're like, why hasn't he come to Australia? We sent him a message on MySpace and said, why haven't you come to Australia? And he said, no one's asked me. And I said, well, I've got a credit card. I'll just book you a flight. And he was like, cool. And this is literally. And we were like, how are we going to promote this? Because no one's ever released his records. He's done all these amazing records, but they're not available in Australia. And it happened that a friend of ours was working, one of Ash's dear old friends from the record store. His record store days was the general manager of a distributor at the time. And he said, you guys should set up a label. I'll back you. Just come and do a label. And we're like, okay. So within a week, we had a label and we had a touring company, and we had no idea how to do any of it. And but we were incredibly optimistic and starry-eyed, so we just started doing it. Mm. And 10 years on, we have over 70 releases. We've done hundreds of tours, and being promoters and running a touring company is the reason that I don't have to have a day job and that I can be in my pajamas, more so than the label. The label has always been something that we have had. We want it to be sustainable, but we've never seen it as a profit-making entity, although we run on a very classic indie label, 50-50 profit share business model, which is the old punk rock way of doing things. We've seen no reason to change that. And we still do it that way, that we keep... I kind of feel like the token indie person on this panel, but we do things very much that old school way, that we keep our costs very low, and we try to recoup our costs quickly so that we can split whatever profit we make with the artist. That's how we've always done it. And these days we have an amazing roster of local artists, including Hate Rock and the Orb Weavers, Leluc, Montero. I've probably forgotten a whole bunch, and internationally, our biggest artists are Beach House. We've put out 2 Beach House records in the space of 2 months this year, which was quite a nerve-wracking experience, but we charted, and that's unusual for us as an independent label to be in the charts. It's quite a thrill. And we also have other overseas artists like Toro y Moi, who we are also his local labels. So we work with overseas labels like Sub Pop, who are Beach House's label in the States. But when Beach House signed with them, they excluded Australia so that they could continue to work with us, because they've been with us from the start. So that's what our business has been based on, is just those personal relationships.
Right. So we heard about pyjamas, I think, about half a dozen times there. So pyjamas are very important if you want to be an indie label, and also have money on the credit card and ring your favourite artist. Gee, I might get Tom Petty down here tomorrow, but I'd need Frank's credit card. Marty Court, you're somebody who can't dress up in your pyjamas and go to work each day. Warner Music is a very big company in Australia. How many Australian artists are on the roster now?
God, that's a lot. It's very diverse because obviously we have various aspects within the label, things like ADA, which is our distribution platform. So that's got artists like Cursor that lives within that. And then we have things like Spinning Top, which is an independent deal, Footstomp, which is another label deal. So there's a variety of label deals that all have their own roster of artists. And then we have direct signings and licensing such as Illy, Pierce Brothers, who you mentioned. Conrad Saul isn't actually signed to us. He's signed to the 300 in the US, but we work him like he's local. East, Kite String Tangle, there's a ton. We've spent the last 5 years, Safia, trying to rebuild our roster because we came from a place where it was quite desolate. So we've had a very kind of strong A&R campaign in the last 5 years to rebuild it.
Now, unlike Sophie's business, Warner Music has very key components. There's an executive level with a managing director and a VP and legal and business affairs. And then under that, there's a whole lot of categories, including A&R, promotions, marketing. It's a real machine to drive out the release, even from a Pierce Brothers to an Ed Sheeran.
Yes, but I hope it's not too machiney. I would hate to think that that's the process, because a machine would imply that we're just kind of mechanical and take that approach in every campaign that we do. But we actually take the view that we treat each artist with respect and what's right for them. And I think now, particularly in this day and age when artists can choose where they want to be, because there are great places like Mistletoe, and there are, even when you look at Future Classic, how that started up and how Flume literally sold whatever he needed to digitally before he even has a physical version out there. People can do it themselves. So I think when you come to a major now, you're coming with a reason and with a purpose. And that's probably to upsize what you're doing. We do have skills. We do get to take an Ed Sheeran or a Michael Bublé into radio. So that gives us certain contacts and options that if you are a local artist and want those doors open, we can kind of do it through another way. So I think in terms of what local labels were there for in terms of the majors a couple of years ago as to what we do now is quite different in how we approach those needs.
When I say a big machine, part of that big machine does include A&R. And A&R is one of those interesting things with record labels over the years that has been disappearing. It's almost like they've been licensing in the A&R to a certain degree. But Warner Music still has a very strong A&R team, don't you?
Yeah, we have 2, 3, 4 people now in Sydney. So one of those includes a dance person, and we have one person in Melbourne, and then we have a scout network across Australia. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do try and make sure. We also have branches in all of Australia. A lot of the labels now are based either in the East Coast or use WA or SA to service the West Coast. But we've made sure we've got people in every state because it's a big country.
So when an artist comes to Warner Music or Warner Music picks an artist, you've got all the components in-house?
Yes, but we do work out of house if that's what the artist wants as well. So.
As opposed to Sophie.
Sophie in her pajamas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting looking at the Mistletoe model to the Warner Music model, because the very foundation of Warner Music back in 1929 was 4 brothers. The Warner brothers were actually 4 real brothers who put a company together. And if we want to look at the origins of Atlantic Records, which is also under the Warner Music umbrella, are the Ertekin brothers.
Yeah.
Who actually used to work out of their house, probably in their pajamas.
And like the spirit of armour, like that's still something that we like to try and carry into the business today, because it was built on passion. And I think whether you're in your pajamas or whether I don't wear shoes sometimes, but I think the fact that the one constant is passion and love for music, which hopefully drives people into the business and how it works.
Yeah. Timothy Jones, when we talk about that big machine, sometimes the big machine is very big. Universal is the biggest of the big. And not all artists within the Universal umbrella require that level of detail and rollout that say is granted to a Justin Bieber, for instance, or a Nicki Minaj or something like that. You work with a lot of alternative acts. So how does your model differ from the other people in the office around you who are driving out somebody like a Justin Bieber?
I think what you mentioned or alluded to just then is only about, it's probably less than 5% of what we do, as in, like 5% of what we do is artists that are signed to Universal for the world but would live better at Caroline. Basically what Caroline was set up to do was to partner with independent labels and independent artists. So currently we've partnered with fantastic label Spunk with an amazing heritage, and we've recently released Joanna Newsom, we released Mac DeMarco, local artists, Gold Class. We teamed up with Cooking Vinyl UK, have set up an Australian office, so recently we had a #1 record with Parkway Drive through those guys. Pop Frenzy, and we do one-on-one deals with local artists, so Marlon Williams and C.W. Stone King and Fraser Gorman we worked with on his record. So what we do is like providing a boutique service for an artist signed to Universal. That's only a very small part of what we do, basically. It's basically been set up as a separate functioning, island connected at the hip to Universal because they fund us, but we do the flexible, touchy-feely deals that independents can do, and that's what we've been set up to do.
So why would a Fraser A. Gorman come to you, or you go to an artist like that, as opposed to putting him through the traditional Universal channel?
Oh, he wouldn't want to sign. He didn't want to sign to a label. He didn't have to sign to us for us to partner with him on the record. So on that deal, it's like a services deal, or what we used to call a distribution deal. So we offer services, and we strike a deal based on the level of support we're giving him. You can opt into using us for marketing. We might do promo, or we might just do straight distribution. So we have a lot of artists where it's the traditional old school deal, like probably 90% of what you work on, where we own the copyright. So those artists that come through internationally, like a St Vincent or Glass Animals or Catfish and the Bottlemen, have been some of our big releases of the last couple of years. We own the copyright on those, and we act as like a label. But for the label partners we have, a lot of those deals might be just distribution deals. Like I did a deal with a German metal label, Nuclear Blast, who have had an incredible year. They signed Slayer, Machine Head. We've had 3 top 5 records this year. We're just their distributor because, it might surprise you, but I'm not a metal expert. I'm not going to come up with the cunning plan to break a metal act, but we're fantastic distributors. The back end's solid with Universal. The accounting's fantastic. That's all they want. So that's our relationship with that label. Yet Loma Vista, a US label, who we do Spoon, St Vincent, we're currently working really hard on a great LA band, Health. They've just signed Ben Harper. That's all under license, so we act like a label and sit around and come up with plans like Marty does, but just with a much smaller team.
Frank Catella and One Love, I guess the core difference with you is you're very genre specific, aren't you? You're more about dance music.
That's right. We look, with the label side of thing with us, we're basically in it by default because, we started off as a graphic design studio and then moved into promoting basically our business went into running clubs, and, we grew from that into, the music festivals and all that sort of side of things. But we had this label that we started 10 years ago with Sony, which was basically a compilation business. So that's what we know, and that's what we've stuck with the dance music genre, I suppose.
So what was sort of the figures you were looking at for an average compilation 10 years ago?
10 years ago, we would have always hit gold, but that started, dropping, about 5 years ago, and the compilation market is pretty much non-existent now, unless it's like really, really generic comps that... But why would you buy a comp now, really? You can go out. We stopped doing physical sales at the start of this year when you can just get onto Spotify now or something like that and create your own playlist. You know, basically a compilation is a playlist, I'd imagine. Yeah.
So you had that unique position when the live events were going and the record label there. Could you offer
I
the
think we
artists...
were at the right place at the right time with the label and everything, because it was, like Sophie said, we started 10 years ago, which was really when the internet explosion happened. And that's really, you know, MySpace and all that sort of stuff. And with our club night that we started at Prince back then in the early 2000s, you know, I've got to say, we've got to attribute that a little bit to the internet and how we were driving it at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, so as you can see, we've got 4 very distinct and different models for the music business up here. A&R was something that I was talking about before. Have you been in a position of A&R?
So our business started off obviously as compilations, then we moved into licensing. This is the recording side of the business. And then we invested heavily into licensing because obviously we were signed to Sony, which had back then a bit of an issue with, I don't know if you guys understand how licensing works, but if you're an indie, you can license things pretty quickly, but if you're a major, it has to go to New York and this and that and blah, 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 you know, like, so it's really hard to work. So we built this business where we were licensing a lot of product in, and we gathered this incredible catalogue over the last few years, you know, for masters and stuff. But now we're finding that we don't really need to do licensing. The industry all over the world's changed a lot. So now we're evolving into more an A&R label, if I can call it that. I'm actually still learning.
But do you mean licensing artists or tracks?
Tracks. We were like a singles company. You know, that's what we did. You know, Avicii had a record, we licensed it, bang, out, sort of thing. And that's what we would make and then we'd reuse it onto compilations. You know, we'd look for, you know, club chart success in terms of, you know, PPCA. We'd also be looking at, you know, there was great income streams. But now the world's changed, so people are just releasing their product themselves. So the ideal thing, the natural progression for us would be to move into A&R and invest in artists and build artists and ship them over the, you know, like, you know, we've got a young act from Perth called Slumberjacks, which I don't know if you guys know, but, you know, that's an artist that our A&R guy Ant found, and he's worked with them, and they're creating, you know, success overseas, and so that, you know, we're getting more into that, and I enjoy that better than just sitting there buying licenses, I suppose.
So in a way, you were sort of ahead of the curve in a way, because we're now seeing the fan base of the audience is hovering towards the single song as opposed to the album or the artist.
That's right. We always felt that, you know, like, I never quite understood the album scene, and that's why I'm the odd person up here, because coming from dance and electronic, because our world is all about singles. You go to a nightclub, you don't hear, you know, 20, you know, songs from one artist played one after the other. So,
unless it's Avicii.
Sorry?
Unless it's Avicii.
Oh, yeah, you know. So, you know, like, you know, our world was always, you know, single shot, single shot, single shot. So now it's, you know, crazy because we're working. I'm trying to get the artists to do at least 3 songs, but, you know, like, you know, write 3 songs. But yeah, it's definitely, everything's changing now. So
yeah. So Sophie, your business model is the complete opposite of what Frank was just saying there. You are after artists with catalogues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a very interesting, strange, changing landscape that we're working in, because I think, you know, the artists that we work with are very, at Mistletoe, both as a label and in terms of the artists that we bring out here with our touring company, are artists who, I guess, go a little deeper. They're not the ones that were sitting at the top of the festival headlines. There are a few lines down on the festivals. They're the ones that are giving the festivals depth, and they're the ones that perhaps connect at a deeper level with fans, but don't sell as many records, obviously. And what we see on but these are very much album artists. They are, all of our artists are people who, even if the whole concept of an album is dying away, I know that the artists we work with will make albums because it's in their nature to want to make a collection of work that fits together as an album. And I think they want people to listen to it as an album is meant to be listened to from the beginning to the end. And it's really interesting to me at the moment now when we have this, on the one hand, the vinyl resurgence, which is all about that. You know, it's about having a beautiful product and putting it on your turntable and having that moment when the needle goes down and you're just waiting for it to kick in, and there's that really, it's just a physical thing, you know, and it's also the showing your record, you know, having your records there as a symbol of who you are and what music means to you. That's what music ownership is now. But then on the other hand, we're abandoning the whole idea of music ownership, like the idea that that your MP3s on your computer mean anything anymore is gone, you know, because now when you have Spotify, you can listen to whatever you want, you know, for, you know, $12 a month or whatever it is. I mean, that took me all of 10 seconds. As a music fan, I was like, yeah, that's a no-brainer, where do I sign? You know, of course I'm going to do that. As a label, seeing this duality of the two things that are happening, I'm not sure where that leaves us as indie labels, because vinyl, we have to do all our releases as vinyl now. There's no doubt that the people who love the bands that are on Mistletoe love vinyl. Vinyl is very, very expensive to make, and it's literally impossible to make a profit from it when you're selling it through record stores. And this is not the fault of the record stores; they're doing it really hard. And but by the time the record store has taken their cut, the distributor's taken their cut, then it comes down to the label and our split with the artist. There's not much of that pie left, you know, and you've basically covered the costs of your vinyl. I think with vinyl, what we find is that the only way to make money on vinyl is to sell it at shows where you've cut out those middlemen and it's just the band at the merch table handing it over to the fan, and then you will make a profit. And also through mail order, which is something that we do a lot. And with our mail order, we give the special editions, you know, the clear vinyl, the beautiful packaging, the things you can't get in shops.
I remember looking just a couple of weeks ago, I was going through a couple of old records at home and found a CD single from 20 years ago still stickered with the price $8.95 on it.
Good
at
old
the time,
days.
I think albums were retailing for around $25, $30. Marty, do you have these discussions internally within your organisation about, at one point we had a valued product in the album that was retailing for upwards of $30, that then the industry basically decided that it was going to move on from, and we went to a digital download model, which initially sounded great because you could get a lot of content out there very quickly. And people could buy it instantly, 24/7, without having to wait for a store to open in the morning or drive across town to get it. To now what we have with the streaming model, which, you know, is now measured instead of in dollars, in fractions of cents. What's the internal conversation that you have within Warner about where this whole industry could be 5 years from now?
Probably exactly what you think it is. I think it's something that's relevant to everyone on this stage. And, you know, the debate about freemium versus paid models, like that, it's a debate, and it's a debate globally, and it's a debate locally, and it's a very hard one to find a right or wrong path through. But streaming obviously throws up a whole bunch of issues in terms of payment through to artists. It throws up a bunch of local issues, and the fact that playlisting is harder for Australian bands to do. So, for example, when Jared James was probably heading for a #1 record, and we had Major Lazer Lean on out at the same time, you know, there was no way he could compete with that, because the streaming numbers meant that Major Lazer had international streams versus a local artist who only ever had Australian streams. So there are a whole bunch of issues that are thrown up by the new business models. But The one thing I guess I would say is the only thing constant is change. And, you know, we're sitting here and talking about MySpace and being nostalgic about it. And unfortunately, having been here long enough to see the skies falling 10 times already, whether it be from, you know, vinyl to digital downloads to mini disc, you know, it's something that comes up, and I would hope the way through it is that we do what we always do, which is constantly evolve and change and adapt to the business. I think if we sit and panic about it, then we won't ever find our way through it. So, but that's just me.
What's interesting with us, you know, being a small indie label, is that we've found that as the decline of MP3 sales has gone down, streaming has gone really up, and I mean really up. So, look, you know, it's great that we're getting our music played in Sweden and everywhere, and we're just getting, every month we get our reports, and I'm just going, wow, this is fantastic. This is.
But what about revenues, Frank? Where, you know, when you say
that's what I mean.
So revenues are going up with the streaming.
MP3
But that's
sales.
'cause you mentioned Sweden. Everyone's on board with streaming. They pay. So once that happens here, we are looking fantastic. It's just a shift. Once people get their heads around, and it will happen.
But Tim,
that you
look at
pay for
what, you know, if
streaming.
I look at what we're sort of like looking at our statements, right? I'd hate to imagine what Warner's is making out of streaming. It must be a big pie. You know?
And look,
Universal.
The thing is,
know?
the market's up for the first time in 12 years this year in Australia. Like, it's a pretty exciting time to be releasing music from where I sit, and it's only all it's gonna take is one key thing, like some crazy bundle offer with Telstra or something that'll move the needle on people's. It won't be a niche thing to be paying $12 a month. It'll just be what you do, like paying your Foxtel, which is so overpriced, or paying electricity. You'll pay it, we'll do nothing different, and all of a sudden, artists and labels are making proper money again.
But it needs to be the paid. Like, that's the debate: freemium versus paid.
Well,
yeah,
but
it's like,
it's.
But it goes
You know,
in-
the labels could force that and make it happen quicker.
correct.
Like, wouldn't bother me if our releases weren't on free Spotify for the first month or whatever, but I don't make that
But
decision for Universal.
as long as you use the word free, and the thing that I think, which we still have to get better at as an industry, is you look at Netflix, and Netflix launch, and no one has any issue in paying for Netflix, and people will do it, and it's easy done. Continually hear the marketing push from the services is it's free music, or get this for free. Free devalues music,
Yeah.
and that's the position we should never be in.
There's
We should
bus
always
stops.
attach-
Only 6 months ago, they did this massive campaign of 10 million free songs. I mean, it is the most stupid thing I've ever seen as a marketing campaign. Don't they, like, the mind boggles.
Well,
It
what
puts us
about
back like
U2? What about U2, one of the Universal bands, when they did their
but
free album?
Apple paid them for the.
Apple paid them,
Yeah.
but they still gave away.
Yeah,
God
but
knows
Apple
how
don't
many
give away
million
music, so
albums.
I don't see that as Apple don't give away music. They're not in the business of giving away music. That's the only time they've done it.
But don't you think that the challenge moving forward for you guys, and even us as indies, is going to be, there's going to be all these $19.99 products, right? There's going to be like Spotify, you need to, join them, and it's going to cost you $10. Then, we hear, Spinning Records now is doing his own thing over there in Holland. You got to join that. That's going to be $5. Then Beatport's going to do another thing. So all at once, you've got all these subscription services that you have to subscribe to. So on a monthly basis. So, and that's where I think is going to be the problem. Like, kids are just going to turn off. Like, it's not the older market that have a regular income and, like, they love spending money. But, everyone's forgetting about those 16, 17, 18-year-olds or 15-year-olds who were the bulk of music purchases throughout history, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Well, 90 years ago in Billboard, there was actually an article about the end of the music industry about to happen if this thing called the pianola went ahead. Because if people could play live music in their lounge room, they would never need to buy music again.
You've been speaking to Seymour Stein.
He probably signed the first pianola artist as well. Yeah.
I think the great thing is, though, music's everywhere. It wasn't everywhere 20 years ago. Every freaking bus and tram, and people are getting run over because they're listening to music. Everyone's got music on. once we work out how to monetize it, it's all fine.
But
It's going to work itself out.
Have we sacrificed quality for quantity, though?
What? That you don't like listening to an MP3? Is that
Well,
what you mean?
you know,
Or-
like a record label will spend, you know, upwards of $100,000. Like the new Don Henley album was $1 million to make. You know, we don't get many of them anymore, and maybe
They
he
should
can
have bought
afford
a
it.
swimming pool.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, I don't.
You know,
I don't.
but if an artist is spending $1 million or $100,000 or $50,000 on making a record, and the record label at the end of the day expects people to listen to it like it's phoned in,
Oh, no, I don't
is
think
that
you can
a
say
problem that we
That's
have?
just commerce. There's going to be major labels pumping stupid amounts of money into like songwriters and clips, and it's like expensive movies and art house movies. There'll always be everything. I think the compromise, I think, is if, you know, you come from, you know, people that love high fidelity and everything, you know, MP3, they'll never get their head around because it sounds compressed and a bit weird. But kids don't care. It's in their headphones and it's fine.
Yeah.
And again, I think if people want high fidelity, they're going to buy a vinyl record. So, you know, I think, you know, you have that duality that for us as an indie label, the interesting and slightly terrifying thing for me about streaming is, as you've said, Frank, the whole thing of people buying a track on iTunes has plummeted, you know. But when in the 10-year space of our label, we started out and we were selling CDs, you know. We were at the tail end of that. And all of a sudden, of course, you know, everyone here, I'm sure, no matter what your involvement in the industry, you know, you would have seen those charts which show what happened with CD sales over the past 10 years. They just disappeared. And just as we were thinking, oh my God, this is not sustainable, we're not going to be able to do this, we started getting money from iTunes. And I was like, who would buy something on iTunes? I had never done, that was incomprehensible to me. Like, why would you do that? Wouldn't you just download it for free? Like, I was very pleased when this money started coming in from iTunes because it made up for the decline of CDs. But now what we're seeing in the last couple of years is a very quick change with plummeting of our iTunes income and the increase of our streaming income. But, you know, streaming is such a numbers game, and this is where it really starts to count, really hit hard for independent artists and independent labels, is that, like, as you're saying, Paul, we're talking about cents, not dollars. We're talking about very small fractions being paid through. And, you know, for someone to, what you used to, like, if someone bought your album on iTunes, you would need them to listen to Spotify 300 times to make that same amount of money. Okay, is that roughly right?
Yes.
So basically, you know, that sounds like a bad deal, but it's not a bad deal if you have lots and lots of people who are listening 300 times. It actually does add up. But I think that this system that we have now is very much to the advantage of the majors and to the big artists. The same as with YouTube. You know, if you put up a YouTube video and 3,000 people watch it, it doesn't really mean anything. But if 3 million people watch it, you are going to start to get an income stream. It's a numbers game. It's all about catalogue. The majors own the catalogue. The majors own Spotify. And with no disrespect to the majors people
I think
here,
you should embrace
it is-
Spotify
it's-
because
Oh, we do.
yeah,
we do.
it's fantastic. You know, like the rumor is that they're paying about 0.02 cents a stream or something like that. But yeah, the ones that are screwing everyone is Google and YouTube. You know, no one even knows what's going on there.
The reality with streaming, and everybody's saying about, you know, they don't get a fair amount of revenue back from streaming. When you actually look at the what an artist is paid per song, per person streamed, it's not all that much different from what radio pays per person, per set of ears, per song when they play a song. It pretty much, when you do the calculations...
And radio have been able to have a great business for 100 years, so why isn't it a streaming company?
Yeah.
But the artists need to earn more from
The
it.
artists.
And,
Well, one of the things that I've noticed with Warner Music and putting the value back into the physical disc, and some of the great packages you've been doing in just this week with the Archie Roach album, the Skyhooks 3 CD reissue last week. You did that magnificent Led Zeppelin reissue and put a lot of faith in that. How much value is there in mining the back catalogue then? Is that something that can go on for a long, long time to come?
Well, it goes to Sophie's point about vinyl having a purpose and a resurgence. It's the same feeling that if people are investing in the physical product, then make it something worth investing in. So, and I think that the bit that we're not touching on probably is the divergence of the market. The fact that you can have 4 people sitting here and represent completely different corners of it shows how fractured and how voluminous it is. So it is kind of quite a mind-boggling time because there is so much music, as you said, and it's everywhere. But it's how you actually kind of cut through that. And that's where, the independents do probably need help and bolstering in to get that space within something like Spotify, because it isn't there. Thank goodness for Adele, because technically she's still independent in some parts of the world. So, in other parts she's not, but in the UK and here she's on an independent label. So that's great to see something that is actually coming through and getting some volume and some strength in streaming. So there are good things that happen still, but it is how you market, who you're marketing to, what you're marketing, and how you're putting up there that matters more and more these days than just chucking a CD out and seeing if it sticks.
Yes, I think Remote Control will probably have a very good Christmas party after this Adele album comes out. But, we mentioned Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, they're probably both up there in the multi-platinum. I haven't even looked at the figures for some things.
Ed's 15 million for over both
worldwide.
albums. He's 10 million on Multiply and 5 on Plus. And that's the thing I would say when we're talking about how the internet's changed the world. It's globalised it a hell of a lot quicker. So something can happen, and it can happen within a second. So you can end up with Gangnam Style when you wake up in the morning when it wasn't there the day before, which no one wants. But it kind of, it is effective in that means and slightly problematic in others.
Yeah, the speed of which things take, like, it makes you laugh at work sometimes. Like we did the first major laser single, Get Free, which by the time they signed the band, we got the pros. By the time we got the pros, radio had added it. The track was on fire, and we were gold like 2 weeks later, and we left the pros on the shelf in their glad wrap and just kept looking at it, going, "Gee, we've worked hard on that track."
Yeah.
But that's the exception. I mean, 90% of acts take stacks of work and stacks of attention and marketing and ideas, but the internet has just enabled things. When they take off super fast, and no one can really catch up.
Yeah, we've had such diversity up here with the panel. I want to throw it open to anybody out in the audience who may have a question for anyone individually, or over here. Yeah.
Last year's keynote, the phrase was mentioned and discussed. Once we work out how to make it all work, streaming will be all right. And one of you just said a few minutes ago, once we work out how to monetise it, we'll be all right. My question is about the we. Who is the we that works out how to monetise it? As in, what say do the artists have? We already know that artists don't have much of a say in how YouTube or Spotify do it, but once we've got label reps up there saying essentially, we'll work out how to monetise it and then everything will be okay. What role do artists have in that discussion?
Well, it's the same role they've always had. If
None.
Well, no, but if artists
Can
want
you
to...
condense that, Frank? Just shorten that answer for us.
I think, touching on what you said, I think, when I say once we work out how to monetise it, I think once the market starts paying for the service, everyone's in a better position. I mean, everyone. Now, if you're signed to a label in a traditional deal, yes, the label's making way more than what you are, like it's been forever. Just like if you were selling a CD or vinyl. If you're doing a 50-50 joint venture or whatever with Sophie, fantastic. As an artist, you're going to participate in that. So, and if you're an independent artist and you've just put it up yourself through TuneCore, you're making the lot. So everyone's better off. It's still the same. It's just splitting income.
I think exactly what Tim said, and the interesting thing now for an independent artist is, do you need a label at all? Because you know, how much of your pie do you want to give away, you know? When you can go to something like TuneCore and pay them $50 and be on all the digital services and get 100% of that income, in a way, you know, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, the thing is with Spotify, you know, it's stitched up. It's been stitched up, you know, you know, it has been stitched up without the participation of artists, and I don't think that's going to change. But as an independent artist, you now can use all those things in actually really amazing ways that wasn't possible in the past. So I think there are possibly pluses for independent artists out of this.
But, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I would also say the artists have a voice and a responsibility within it. And I think what Taylor Swift did, to talk quite bizarrely about it, but she's probably had the most impactful messaging on streaming services, A, by taking herself off Spotify, and B, by doing her big, massive mic drop on Apple Music, which managed to literally negotiate on Twitter, something that labels couldn't necessarily do. So the artists do have a say and a presence. I think artists getting up on stage a la Tidal, where it's some of the richest artists in the world, talking that they're not getting paid enough is probably not the brightest of moves. If they'd got up and said, here's a young band, this is what they would have made when I released Blueprint 1 versus what they're making now, that probably would have resonated with the public way more than, I'm sorry, Jay-Z, you're not making as much as you used to. So.
When you say that labels can't negotiate with Spotify, but Taylor Swift can, I mean, what hope is
It wasn't Spotify, it was Apple.
Oh,
Yeah.
you said,
She took herself off Spotify, and then after...
you said that labels can't, majors can't negotiate with Spotify.
Yeah.
What hope is there for the rest of us?
Sorry? What was
What
the...
hope is there for the rest of us if only Taylor Swift...
Oh, I think that independents are actually far more deft in the ability to do what they want.
I think also you can use Spotify in a different way. I mean, for instance, we have a couple of artists that we work with on the touring side of things who are not on Spotify, and I can actually see, and that's a choice that they've made, and I respect that wholeheartedly, but I can also see the disadvantage that is for them not being on Spotify, because I believe they'd have a high profile in Australia if people could listen to their music on Spotify, because there is that kind of peer-to-peer thing, you know, like I just think, gosh, if only people could see that other people are listening to that artist, they would be intrigued and they would listen to it. So to me, for independent artists, it's pretty much like the radio. It's like you want to be on Triple R, you get a very small percentage of that when it comes down to you, but it's still very important for you. And I would advise any artist to be on Spotify.
And I think one of the arguments for why the majors can't negotiate with Spotify is they might just be negotiating with themselves. If you go and have a look at the shareholder breakdown of what Spotify is, you may be a bit horrified. We've only got a few more minutes to go. Is there any other questions over here?
Just with the microphones first.
Down in the... hang on, where's the microphone then?
It's over here.
Okay.
There's one over here.
They're asking the blind man in the audience to, point out the microphone.
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, Spotify is clearly awesome. And I guess the challenge should be there for labels to push Spotify, should be to push Spotify into upgrading free users to premium users. And to that point, that gentleman's point, if artists get behind Spotify, like we saw One Direction geo-blocking their YouTube users to push actual listens to Spotify, and it worked amazingly for them. Are the majors working with Spotify towards something in between a freemium and a premium, like a premium light, for instance? So it kind of brings down the threshold of what someone, that you want to get away from just paying, being free to pay something, because people are always going to sort of drift towards free given the choice.
I would love to answer that question, but I honestly don't know the answer to it, so I can't even comment on it. Sorry.
I think everyone also has to look at the markets, right? Like, I know that with the market that we work with, which is the dance community, you know, they're the biggest tight asses out there. You know, they're not going to spend anything on. I could run, you know, Stereosonic at its peak was doing 280,000 people around Australia, right? It was so hard to convert those people into getting them to buy an iTunes download of the compilation. It just never happened. You know, they'll get onto their podcasts, they'll get onto their things. You know, and we've seen this a million times, you know, these sort of kids, you know, like they're just not, I don't know if they'll spend that extra dollar to buy, to buy a premium product and several premium products at the same time. So,
Could you incorporate it into the ticket price?
no, because it's just the nature of that community there. You know, like it's probably the biggest community that's out there. You know, they go out to nightclubs every Saturday night and every night of the week and all this, but they're not going to engage in spending that premium dollar to buy that product. I can't see a big percentage of it, sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's one more question, is there? Is that...
All right, yep, just getting back to sort of the discussions around A&R and maybe just a quick answer from each of the panellists. I was told once that while artists go out and they hustle to get an agent and look for a publicist and they try and get media to their shows, not to worry about the label, because the label, the A&R people will find you. When you're at that stage, you'll get a tap on the shoulder and it'll all go from there. Is that your experience, or are you more likely to respond to someone who's actually getting in touch with you and trying to get you to the shows?
We listen, like people can't, send me, demos all the time, and we try and listen to all of them. It's just hard, just trying not to offend people. But,
go on, it's the end of the day, Frank.
End of the day. No, it's just hard, it's hard also for a label because, at the end of the day, with a label, it's the bottom line, we're all doing it for the love of it at the moment, and I'm sure, get off eating pizza soon and do a bit more fine dining, but the whole thing is, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. If you send it to me, I'll play it, I'll listen to it, I'll have a look at it, I'll look at your Facebook, I'll see, if something really stands out, and then I'm giving it to the A&R guys going, listen to this is fantastic, then they'll have a listen to it and go, oh, shut up. So, or they'll go, this is fantastic. But yeah.
So the majority of your artists would have been found by A&R rather than,
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
I think for us, being a label run by two people, it's very much the luxury of running your own label is you get to do exactly what you want. You're answering to nobody, and we only do things that we absolutely love. So, I mean, we've knocked back some of the greatest albums I've heard over the last 3 years, especially. And I hear them on the radio and think, that could have been ours, but. It's really, in this environment, it's like we need to be careful about being sustainable and only doing as much as we can do. And also, the longer that you're around, the more your existing roster are going to do an album every couple of years, and so you can't keep taking on new artists or you will just explode, But, we do get a lot of people emailing us and sending us music, and to be honest with you, not one artist that we've never picked up an artist that way. It's always been us going to them.
Yeah.
And from our side, I think it's just, I don't think there's one set rule or way of doing it. Music comes in different ways and it presents itself in different ways. So I think sometimes with A&R, it's at what time do you sign a band? Because sometimes bands can get signed too early, which is detrimental as well. If they're not ready and they're suddenly thrust out there, then that's problematic. But yeah, if it's either the internet has obviously opened up a lot of music discovery for A&R guys as well as it has for the public. So yes, gigs are important. Yes, they'll come to gigs, but they can also be there. I would say if you are going to hassle an A&R person just appreciated that there's probably another 50 people hassling them as well. So yeah, use your skills of persuasion and politeness rather than pestering.
Right. Well, we would like to thank our panel, Frank Catella.
Can I just say one more thing? One of the things that you guys should all be aware of, right, is not so much what Spotify, how it's going to hurt you, how much less money you're going to make, or being with an indie or with a major and all that. What I reckon moving forward is going to be one of the biggest problems in this city and every city around the world is the gig situation, like whether it's a live venue, whether it's a dance club, whether it's a club or anything like that, because as these venues are starting to disappear and as festivals are starting to close down, there's not going to be the community, because everything's always going to be local, but there's not going to be that community element locally. It'll all be based on the future, which will be global charts, this, that. We need those venues in these cities. So, if you see your councillors and all that, we don't want a situation with what's going on in Sydney where they're closing down a whole stack of venues, because that's going to impact everyone. In 10 years' time, there won't be a music industry, and it won't be because of digital and streaming. It'll be because you won't be able to have somewhere to play your music. That's it. That's all.
Thanks, Frank. Sophie Miles, apologies for making you get dressed today and come in here and talk to everybody. Back to the jammies for you. Timothy Janes, thank you for coming along, and Marty Court down from Sydney from Water Music. Thanks for all the information. What a wonderful panel. Thank you.